Welcome to Join Our Town, and I'm your host, Mitchell Taylor. Our topic today is civic affairs, and is New York City meeting the needs of our young people in the city? And we're joined today by Chancellor of the Department of Education, Dennis Walcott. Thank you so much for being with us on today. And you wanted to talk first about raising the bar and children first. Tell us about that.
And Children First is basically what it says. It's about making sure we put our children, our students first, and it's not about we, the adults. And a lot of times we get lost in the back and forth in both the headlines and the verbal battles that take place about the adults. And quite frankly, to me, it's about our students and how we put our students and our children first. And raising the bar really deals with how we establish a higher standard for our school system, especially how it benefits our students in the long run and preparing them for college and careers and what it means. And so how we deal with some of the tough issues that have been very intractable over the years and try to solve those issues and putting programs in place and putting quality services in place to benefit our children. So this summer, for example, we put in several new programs, one called our Summer Quest program. And our Summer Quest program is starting it out as a pilot up in the Bronx with 12 schools. And it's a program to prevent summer learning loss from taking place. So these are students who wouldn't necessarily be retained, but they are students who may not be at the top level of proficiency. And so working with both schools and community-based organizations, we identified a number of students who are participating in our Summer Quest program. And so they're getting a lot of learning as well as a lot of fun interwoven together. And I've been to a number of the sites and they're doing outstandingly well. And so they'll start school well prepared and not have summer learning loss. Another new program we put in place this summer is called our Summer Institute for Dreamers, basically, our Dream Institute.
Wow.
And these are to prepare our 7th and 8th grade students for specialized high school, and really trying to increase the pool of students from diverse backgrounds to both take the test, but also qualify for special high schools. So it's a program that's very, very intensive. I've been to several of the sites, and I've seen the books that have been prepared. And I don't think you or I can do the work that they're doing now.
I'm sure
and I know I couldn't. And they're really working very hard to prepare. And the nice thing about it is that every student that I've talked to, they are there with such enthusiasm because they're so appreciative of the investment that's being made in them and preparing them for the specialized high school. And that really gets to the issue around the youth that you talk about, how we establish that high bar for our youth, and we as adults provide the foundation for them to flourish and understand the importance of being children, but also the importance of learning as well.
Wow. You know, since you've been in your position, there have been several innovations that have come out. These two are part of it. And my next question was going to be, what is city government currently doing to invest more in our youth? And like the 3 initiatives that you just named, are there any other things that you like to highlight that you've kind of horned in on the last year and a half since you've been
Sure. I mean, the mayor has made a major investment, both personally as well as professionally, in our Young Men's Initiative.
Now, make sure that the viewers know what that means, because our mayor, oftentimes, he gets a bad rap, but a lot of people don't know he invests millions of his own personal money for inner city initiatives.
A lot of times he doesn't talk about it, but this one he was very clear in that, both from the Bloomberg Philanthropies as well as George Soros from the Open Society, they invested a significant amount of money into our Young Men's Initiative, as well as through city tax money as well. I think roughly $67 million, and not just focusing on education, but focusing on the issue of disparities around health, the issue of we have an overrepresentation in correction facilities and how we address that. In education, we developed a program called our Expanded Success Initiative, and taking a look at how we graduate Black and Latino males at a higher level. And that is a major commitment on the part of the city, and especially the mayor, around how we invest in young men of color and women as well, who have unfortunately been part of major disparities. I mean, and you know this as well, where you live, your church, your involvement overall in the civic life, that from a health point of view, we suffer high levels of diabetes. You talk about premature births. You take a look at every health initiative that's out there or issue that's out there. Black and Latinos, especially males, we die younger, more murdered, even though crime rate is down overall still in our communities. When you take a look at those who are killed by guns, it's boys between the ages of 16 through 24. I mean, and so the mayor has tackled that and tackled it in a very comprehensive way through city agencies and also privately.
Wow. How can communities, oftentimes we take a lot of time to highlight the problem. We pray the problem, but we really don't talk about and highlight what are some of the solutions that you guys have thought of and you've encouraged action on, and you've had a hard time getting traction, but if you had action, participation, you would have traction. What are some of those things like?
Well, I mean, you raise the issue. I think we have a responsibility in the community, because I'm part of the community as well, to talk about the issues that are undermining, I think, the strength of what's taking place with a number of communities throughout New York City. So, for example, the issue of violence that's happening with the increase in guns. The mayor has talked about it. He's taken a very strong stand. I think we have to have, and we continue to have, articulation as far as those issues within the communities in different parts, whether it's faith-based leaders, whether it's community leaders, or just everyday people, and talking about what it actually means and coming up with solutions, but also identifying that as an issue. So I think that's one thing we have to do, because that impacts significantly on our children, and having youth who are killed or shot or running in fear of being shot. You can't operate that way. You can't live that way. And I think we have a collective responsibility as community people not to rely solely on government to be the solution to that. Yes, we want police there. Yes, we want police to be effective. But at the same time, we have to step to the plate as far as the role of the community and identifying ways to address that. So I think a lot of that does take place, but I think more of that needs to take place as far as the articulation of the issue and people saying, not here. I'm not going to tolerate it, and this is what we're going to do about it. And so to me, that's an important first step. The role that we play in the community as far as talking about having our schools at a high level, for example, and making sure that we provide the support from both a community perspective but also a government perspective to allow that to happen. When we were off air, we were talking about your love for cycling. I was telling you about how I just competed in a triathlon. I think we have a responsibility to talk about fitness and health and proper eating in the community. And when you take a look at some of the disparity issues as far as health disparities and some of the foods that we eat in the community and what it actually means as far as being overweight or having diabetes at a higher level, especially in Black and brown communities, I think we have a responsibility to talk about that. I know that, with your cycling, it's a great enjoyment, but it's also great fitness as well. And what can we do both as government, but also what can the community do to talk about it, how we prepare better menus, better diets, and making sure people are aware of that, and making sure that our children are eating in a healthy manner as well. And the final thing, and I always like to try to confront difficult things in a variety of different ways, is how we talk to each other in the community and how adults talk to children as well.
That's interesting.
And how I've seen a number of cases where people, parents, and sometimes I'm not sure if they're just adults in the life of a child, will talk in a way that is just totally disrespectful to that child. And then that's how that child then gets his or her image, and it really impacts on the self-confidence of that child. And I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we're able to articulate our views to children when they're not doing right, but also knowing how to do it, and so you don't belittle, demean that particular child that then carries with that child in her or his life, and we have to be very conscious of that.
How concerned are you, how troubled are you with the rise of shootings in public housing amongst that demographic that you just spoke of, 16 to 24? Over the last 3 weeks, we've had a population that represents, what, like 1% of New Yorkers, some say, representing 20% of the crime, in New York City. And that's coming from young people that live in segregated pockets of poverty. How much concern, what do you think about as a leader and our youth that live in those demographics? I mean, it seems like an impossible situation to get your arms around. What are some of the ideas that you have?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. One, bullets don't discriminate. And so anywhere, whether it's public housing on the street, and that's not public housing, anyone that has illegal guns, they're there to use it illegally, and we have to be very conscious of it. That's why the mayor has been very clear in his role as far as the leader of New York, but also the urban center of the country, to talk about illegal guns and putting programs in place, as well as working hard to get Congress to take it up as an issue to address the flow of illegal guns here in New York, and working with a coalition of mayors from across the country as well. So in a government way, that's something that this mayor has done, has been very clear about that. I think we in the community have a responsibility to talk about it, but not just talk about it. What are we doing as parents? What are we doing as community leaders to address that, and having not just programs in place, but also taking the responsibility to say it. We're not going to allow it. And people, a lot of the people know who the folks are, who are the bad guys or the bad people out there who have the guns, and we have a responsibility to do something about that and step forward to talk about it and work in cooperation with police. You know, earlier there was National Night Out, and people talking about, rightfully so, the collaboration between the police and the community and what we can do together. And I think we have to make sure it's not just one night out, but it's a constant night out for people to stay involved, to work with their local precinct. And I think when we work closely with the precincts, and the precincts work closely with the community, all of us benefit in the long run. And I think we have to step forward to say, you know, I'm going to give some time and volunteer with my local precinct, or volunteer with this local community-based organization to provide the opportunities and support to work with our youth to make sure that they're not stepping into a role of violence, and trying to work from a civic point of view and from a government point of view to address the illegal guns that are flowing into the city.
Wow, you know, and you personally have experience with the youth/gun issue, because your son had, and we only have like a minute left, but I mean, your son had.
Yeah, my son was shot. I mean, I'm very public about that.
I know.
It's been a while ago, and he was very lucky. I mean, 8 shots were fired at him. 1 actually did hit him, and he was able to escape those who were trying to kill him, basically. And he's doing well now, but again, there by the grace of God, he was very lucky.
Well, listen, we have about 30 seconds.
Sure.
I want you to look into your camera and just tell
I didn't know I had a personal camera.
the viewers the most important things you want them to embrace as their children face the new school year.
Well, I think they should stay involved with what's happening with their child or their children in education. Find out information, constantly ask their teachers what's going on, making sure whether they're available directly or through other means to get the information from the school as far as what's happening with the Common Core curriculum and how it will benefit their child. And also they need to take, as I said earlier, the common sense approach, making sure they're eating healthy, making sure they get a good night's sleep, and also checking their homework on a regular basis. So important to both check the homework and find out what the homework actually means, so they have a clearer understanding. And with that, along with having great teachers in the classroom and a great leader in the school, our children will benefit in the long run.
Well, this is amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on Joy in Our Town.
It's a pleasure.
I think that we need another interview for you to come back and talk more about the great work that you're doing at the Department of Education, our mayor, and some of the challenges that our young people are
And thank you for everything that you do. Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
No,
Thank
really,
you so
thank you
much.
for everything. Appreciate it. Bishop, pleasure.
Dennis Walcott, thank you for watching Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Mitchell Taylor. See you.
I wanted to be in the military since I was a kid.
I served in the United States Air Force.
I served a total of 16 years.
I was deployed 13 times.
On my second deployment, 4 bombs hit my vehicle.
And at 19 years old, that's the first time I ever saw somebody die.
Coming back, I was raging.
I started having pretty horrible nightmares.
I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweats.
I started drinking a lot.
I felt worthless.
I guess I never recognized it in myself.
Eventually, one day I just walked into the VA hospital and said I'd like to see somebody.
Don't suffer alone. You gotta find that link with somebody that'll make you let it go.
It all starts with going to the VA. There's a whole community of veterans that just want to help you out.
It's for the guys who couldn't come back, so you owe it to them to live well, because they're not here with their families.
So many kids' activities today seem to leave out the activity part. New research tells us that just getting children to walk an extra 35 minutes a day could spare them the pain of thinning bones later in life. Encourage your kids to get up, get out, and get moving.
Hello. Hey, Grandma, how about another grape soda?
A public service message on building strong bones for kids from the Pediatric Orthopedic Society of North America and the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
You have the time to give. You have the capacity to care. You have the experience to contribute. And your country needs you, one of its greatest assets. Americans whose lifetime of knowledge and know-how will make the difference. Take what you learned in the workplace and apply those skills to your community. Shape tomorrow by being a mentor and tutor for children. Make independence a reality for people who need assistance and companionship to continue to make their house their home. Make a difference today. Get involved.
Welcome back to Join Our Town, and I'm your host, Mitchell Taylor. Our topic today is crime, and we're talking about the effects of incarceration on women and their families. And we're joined today by the chair of the Advisory Council of Kairos Outside New York City, Coralie Joseph. Welcome. And also the financial secretary of the organization, Lloyd Johnson. Welcome also. Thank you for being guest on Join Our Town.
We're happy to be here.
First of all, talk to us about incarceration here in New York City. Talk to us about that.
Okay. New York City has about 62,000 folks incarcerated. About 2,000 of those folks are women. I would say 80%, 70 to 80% of those folks are right here, come from 2 boroughs in New York City. That's 3 zip codes in the Bronx and 4 zip codes in Brooklyn. Those folks, all those folks, mostly everyone, all those prisoners are incarcerated upstate New York. So it is very stressful for the families to go visit these folks and support them. And those zip codes that I mentioned, if a person lives in those zip codes, it's 100% possible that they know somebody incarcerated, whether it's their family, their friend. And the problem with that is that a lot of those people become incarcerated eventually because of the environment and just everything that goes on around there.
So in New York City, you're saying that 70% of the prison population comes from Brooklyn and the Bronx, zip codes that are in the Brooklyn and the Bronx.
Correct.
And 2,000 of those inmates are women.
Correct.
And most of them are in upstate New York prisons.
Yes.
Excellent. Now, give us an idea of what are the most prevalent crimes that you're seeing people committing. Are they being locked up because of quality of life crimes, because of domestic violence crimes, because of, what is the concentration, or the highest concentration? Lloyd, you can chime in at any time. You know, what do you see the most frequent crimes being?
Well, I understand most of the crime is drug related. However, in our program, we don't discuss crime, and we don't discuss what the person who was incarcerated did in order to be there. We mainly talk about, I know we're going to talk about this later, we mainly talk about how we can assist the family of the incarcerated person. But much of the crime is drug related. I would say most of it. In looking at statistics, I don't have exact statistics with me right now.
But it's drug related.
Most of it is drug related.
And would you say these people that are incarcerated are the high level drug distributors?
No, I don't think so. It's mostly low level, although I understand that the FBI profile of a person who uses and sells drugs is a young white male. However, unfortunately, the police don't target that community. They target mainly African American communities and non-white communities, Hispanic communities, and so on. So that's why the Bronx and Brooklyn supply most of the inmates who are in the prisons upstate.
Right.
91% of the prison population come from New York City.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of writings that have been, presented on incarceration, mass incarceration, one in particular, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. And when you look back at the war on drugs, they never really got at the drug kingpins.
No.
They just got the low-level people that are users and maybe, small hand-to-hand distribution, and then that resulted in this mass prison incarceration. So I want to ask you this question because, how does this impact women? Because not just women that are incarcerated, but it affects women in general, right? How does it affect and impact women? And how many does it impact, based on the statistics that you gave us?
Well, if there are 60,000 men in prison and 2,000 women, there are mothers, wives, sisters, children, aunts and aunties that are impacted.
So there could potentially be thousands and thousands. So if there's 2,000 women, there's thousands.
That's right. And for the women, what's the children, their children, and I work in the school system, and their children are put in foster homes. Okay? And sometimes they're put away, they're so far away that the children don't see them once a month, maybe once every 3 months. And when they come back to school after seeing their parent, just put yourself in the place of someone whose parent is locked away, and you go visit your parent and know that your parent may be 6 or 8 hours away. You took that bus in the middle of the night and you came back. You saw your parent for 3 or 4 hours, and you know that your parent is going to be locked away for years. And the feeling, and they come back to school and they act out, and they don't tell folks right away, because when someone has someone in prison, they keep it as a deep, dark secret. And then maybe eventually, after 6 or 8 months of counseling, they break down and say, my parent is incarcerated.
Wow.
And, then the tears start flowing, and then you start trying to help them.
Right.
But then they're living with foster parents. They're living with, aunts and uncles who don't care and love for them as their parent would. And no matter what crime the mother has committed, it's still a mother's love for that child.
Right. And the child is impacted by it because the mother is incarcerated. There's limited visitation and accessibility. And then they act out in the classrooms.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing.
The other problem with that is if a parent is in prison, there's a 70% chance that child will be in prison also.
Lloyd, wait a minute. You said that if the parent is in prison, there's a 70% chance
that the child
will follow?
Be in prison. I met the Reverend Dr. Wilson Good, former mayor of Philadelphia.
Yes.
And he works with the Amachi mentoring program, mentoring children of incarcerated. And he was telling me that he met a man in prison when he went to visit people in prison who stopped him and told him, he says, I met my father for the first time in prison.
Wow.
And he says, and I have a son out there. And my expectation is that if I ever get to meet him, it'll be in here. That's his expectation. His father's in prison, he's in prison, and he expects his son to be in prison.
So wait a minute, Lloyd, because you lost me, but you telling me that he met his father not on a visit.
For the first time.
That's why I got confused.
No, they were inmates.
They were inmates. The father and the son were inmates.
Right.
Didn't know each other prior to this?
Right.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
And
Wow.
that's where they met.
They met there.
As inmates in prison, and he expects that will be the same thing will be with his own son.
I got you.
That's 3 generations.
Cool, cool. Wow. Well, talk to us about Kairos outside New York City. Talk about the work, and I know it's a multi-level international platform, so talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, Kairos Outside, this women's ministry, it was came out of San Quentin in California. There was a Kairos outside and there was a Kairos inside. Inside is where we go in to minister to the men in prison. Not just having a service and leave.
Mm-hmm.
We stay for 4 days and we do a short course in Christianity.
Wow.
And the men significantly are changed. So this lady by the name of Joe Chapman in California was told by the warden, we have the men changed, but their wives are coming in and they don't understand what's going on, coming to visit. What's going on with this, you know? And the wives want to know.
Mm-hmm.
So she came up with the idea, why don't we have a Kairos outside so that we could support the women and tell the women, and so that the women could be on the same level with the men. And it's just, there are 3 things that keep people from going back to prison.
Yes.
They have to have a spiritual experience in prison. The families outside must be supportive, and they must get some sort of employment to keep them going.
Wow.
So we empower these women by giving them the same course. We empower these women. We give them a chance to come, a place to talk, a place to tell other people how they're feeling, people who really care. We listen to them, we hug them, and they walk out of the weekend feeling truly empowered.
Yes.
Because they
Right.
breathe a sigh of relief.
Right.
Thank God they could talk to somebody
Right.
and other people who understand what they're going through.
This
And
is
it's
powerful.
big relief.
It's good for them to know that they're not alone.
Right.
That
right.
there are other people in their community. There have been women who've come to our weekend and knew each other from the community, but didn't know that either one had a relative in prison.
In prison.
Now they
become a community.
Form a community, and there's a community. Just like Kairos Inside forms a community inside, a Christian community inside of the prison. Coralie did Kairos Inside. She and
For
my
10
wife.
years.
Wow.
Danbury
For 10 years.
Federal.
But see,
Federal
now our viewers totally understand this.
Right.
You know, Kairos Inside is
That's right.
ministering to the inmates there.
right.
Kairos Outside is
Yeah.
ministering to the families that are affected.
And there's also Kairos Torch, which is ministers to the youth, age 24 and younger.
Yes.
Now, we have about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Can you tell us maybe one of the stories, another one of the stories of your experience in dealing with the population, whether it's the outside family or the inside inmate?
Well,
success story.
Okay, so one success story is this. One of our folks who was on team, young woman who was 26 years old, she was on team, and she was excited about being on team. Doesn't have anybody in prison, just wanted to work with us. A year ago, she was incarcerated in Dominican Republic for some fluke reason, 10 months. And because she knew that we were praying for her, because we knew that we cared for her and we would understand her, she was exonerated. But just the hope and that she had inside of her that we were going to be there for her.
Wow.
Kept her buoyant.
Wow.
And she's out, cleared, and, you know, but just that the caring. And we sent her notes, we did all sorts of stuff to just keep her going. It's just wonderful.
This is awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.